Hello and a warm welcome to this special edition of Invest Africa. I'm Godfrey Mutizwa. Now, the city of Cape Town is currently playing host to the annual African Mining Indaba, where the top mining CEOs and Africa's government leaders have come to discuss, debate and dissect issues and opportunities within Africa's mining industry. This is the 19th year that the Indaba has been held on African soil. Earlier this week, I caught up with some of the attendees to share their expectations of this year's event, as well as what they regard some of the key issues affecting the mining industry on the continent.
I think coming out of this Indaba for us is just the reassurance by government and also by labor that there is a scope for us to work together. You know, the challenges that the mining industry is facing at the moment are not insurmountable challenges. What is important is a commitment, you know, from all of us, from business, from government and from labor, to find lasting solutions.
Is that will there? What's your sense?
Look, I think the will is there, but I think that somehow we miss one another. You know, we need to find a place where we can both commit to a common set of values, a common vision, and a common sense of identity. You know, I'm almost inclined to say that we need a mining codice, you know, where we just reaffirm, you know, what it is that we want to get out of the mining industry, and what is it going to take. In other words, what is the respective and the relative role of each of the players in the mining industry? You know, when you're talking about the wheel, is that unless we really entrench our sense of commitment, we're going to keep on changing goalposts. I think that the mining industry is ready and willing to invest to the extent that we've got a predictable regulatory framework. We also have a better sense of some of the key drivers, you know, of growth. One of them being the issue of the quality and the quantity of investments in infrastructure, and also some of the tariffs. I mean, you know, at the moment, you know, ESCOM is proposing a multi-year price determination on electricity. These are significant input costs and that affect the mining production. Having said that, we're very much aware of our own obligation, you know, as a mining company, in terms of ensuring that we active as employers, and also making sure that we respond, you know, positively to the issues of the mining charter, for example, and to other national transformation imperatives. So we are alive to that, but what we need is that kind of a dialogue that reaffirmed the relative commitments of all of these parties, you know. And I'm hoping that, you know, in this mining industry, you know, there'll be a reaffirmation, you know, of those kinds of conversations, and hoping also that post the Indaba, there'll be firm plans and programs that will then give more impetus, you know, to that.
The African continent is endowed with an abundance of mineral wealth, including 40% of gold, 60% cobalt, and 90% of the world's platinum group metal reserves. Both local and international mining companies are looking to extract this wealth, evoking political pressure on African governments to take a more proactive and strategic role in the mining sector, including facilitating open and clear dialogue between business, government, and labor.
I would like to indicate that the quality and the caliber of the dialogue between the government and the mining sector has been increasingly improving. And therefore, in the past 6 months, we have been dialoguing really at a deeper level. We are getting to understand and cooperate with each other far better than we have done before. Yes, in the past, we have cooperated, but the developments of the past 6 months have indicated that we really need to deepen and broaden our dialogue.
I would imagine we are not perhaps where we want to be. In terms of the private sector and its requirements, what more do you think ought to be done? Is it the government that should be coming forward and saying to the private sector, guys, you need to be talking us more, or it's an approach that's needed from both sides?
I think there's an approach needed from both sides. for the government and the mining sector is the relationship of partnership.
Yeah.
And that partnership, I think there is a challenge for us as the mining industry to communicate early, to communicate clearly, to communicate honestly with the government. And the government has got to reciprocate that. In a similar fashion, the communication with the union leadership, we need to do the same. And we have been communicating, sometimes we have been missing each other. But also we have stakeholders, and sometimes the stakeholders, especially the investors or shareholders, are not as well understood as they should be. And I think we need to say, let them be understood that they require the returns on their investments. But we need to persuade them as well to moderate the returns that they require, so that we say all the stakeholders need to sustainably benefit from the mining industry.
Now, some people would go so far as to say the relationship between government and the private sector is actually poisoned, and that the atmosphere needs to be transformed for there to be meaningful dialogue between the two parties. From where you sit, how far and how long do you think it will take to get the two parties together?
I can't say the relationship and the communication between the government or even the union and the chamber or the mining industry is poisoned. I would be saying it has areas of improvement, and we are improving those. It is my considered opinion that probably within a space of 3 to 6 months, our communication is going to be at the level where it could be and should be. We're looking at the problems which we are faced with, which our minister has stated, the triplets of unemployment, poverty and inequality, and we need to deal with those issues, and we are dealing with them, and we're improving the cooperation in dealing with them.
We all need to work very hard to narrow the gap between government, business, and all the stakeholders in the mining industry. You know, Godfrey, if I look at the mining industry, shareholders want returns in the short term, communities want to be developed, government want taxes, they want their fair share, and it's marrying all of those objectives that will bring a sustainable model for mining.
Yeah. Now, you of course advise private companies about investments and working with governments and those kind of things. From where you sit in terms of the distrust, particularly from international investors, what do you think it will take for the government to win back international investor confidence again?
You know, I don't think it is only for the government, it's for our whole country to portray a positive image. Right. I was at the time when Marikana happened, I was in America, and it was spooky to see it on the television screens, the way we protest. So I do think it is everyone in South Africa have a duty to come together and portray a more positive image of our country. It's not only government, it is not only business, it is every man in the street need to take up their task as a good citizen to start to work together in the way we protest, in the way we work together. We need to take hands.
To date, the increase in mining exploration development on the continent has been primarily focused on gold and diamond exploration. Although there's still great scope for these commodities, riding on the back of improving base metal prices, this sector could see an increase in both activities and investment.
We're seeing a lot of interest in Africa right now, as you know, Godfrey. Some of this, and most of it, in fact, is resources driven. And therefore, you know, the countries that are obviously resource rich when you look at Southern Africa, for instance, out north of South Africa, we're seeing a lot of interest in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, notwithstanding what's happening there, in the DRC, which is, has always been the case, but the challenge there, as you know, is always been governance issues in terms of both the corporate and the country-related risks. But we're also seeing a new kid on the block, South Sudan. We're seeing a lot of interest happening there.
What's going on there?
Well, what's going on there is the traditional resource wealth that South Sudan has, which is energy-based and oil-based specifically. And then, to the extent that South Sudan is looking at moving away from its reliance on the north, they're looking to increase their reliance on relationships in the south. And because of this, this has opened up whole new opportunities, whether it's with relation to pipelines for the oil, or with relation to refining for the oil, or with relation to just general marketing arrangements for that oil.
So when we look at the interest that you've been able to generate and that you are seeing coming into Africa, surely it gives the lie to this whole assertion that capital is a coward. When you look at the places where it's going, I mean, South Sudan is virgin territory. You look at Zimbabwe and the issues that they're dealing with. That's also a very difficult operating environment. Is it because this country have got resources that perhaps you can't find anywhere on earth, or is it just, simply the fact that, where there's a return, risk will come?
Well, I can tell you, if I had believed capital is a coward, I would not be where I'm standing. But definitely what we have seen is that, capital is always looking for well-structured risk. So the challenge is always to look at the particular structure that you're originating and then try to fit it within what capital and what the capital markets will generally applaud. But obviously, there's no vacuum. There's no such thing as a total lacuna in the capital space. As you know, recently we've had China, we've had India, we've had Brazil, all of them, and Russia included, all of them looking at Africa from a very interesting perspective and with different eyes. Yeah. But additionally, we have the traditional markets in the West that continue to look at it. Yeah. But all that has happened, at least in my recent experience, is that it has become very competitive in the African space, because Africa is literally being spoken of as the last frontier, and I am seeing it from the practical perspective.
Yeah. Now, a lot of has been said about private equity activity across Africa. There's been a suggestion that there's a lot of fundraising that's going on for Africa-focused projects. In terms of the returns that you've been seeing, has that been justified? And also in terms of the pricing for some of the equity as well as capital that's coming into Africa, what sort of trends have you been picking up?
Well, the interesting trend is the one I started out with, the Chinese trend, for instance. China has been a very big game changer in terms of traditional private equity structures. What the Chinese will normally do is that they will look at smart joint ventures and partnerships where they will work, and then obviously introduce the element of long-term Chinese development capital at a very low cost. And then, of course, we've got our traditional friends on the Western Front who basically have emphasized over the recent past in terms of creating funds that are Africa-focused, but more funds that are sector-focused.
We are going for a short commercial break. More Invest Africa when we return.